Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we start, I would like to draw your attention to my weekly email newsletter, Friday Focus. Each Friday, I focus on one topic with one action arising. The link to sign up is in the show notes, or head over to amyrowlandson.com and sign up right now. Today, I am joined by Shelley Bridgman. Shelley, a huge welcome to the Focus on Why podcast.
Thank you very much, Amy. I can't believe I'm with the Queen of Podcasters. There we go.
Well, that's a title that I have been given by many, but it's not something I call myself. I just enjoy this field of podcasting, and this medium is just such a joy. It really is. Just being able to showcase so many people's wonderful stories, and in particular, their why.
Their why, absolutely.
So where are we going to start today? I'm going to ask you, what is it you're doing at the moment, Shelley?
Well, I'm coaching, and I'm still practicing as a psychotherapist. So they're my two bread and butter activities, but I'm doing a lot of training as well. Training with health workers and psychotherapists, and speaking occasionally when I can too.
And psychotherapy, which particular area do you focus on?
Well, I trained a long time ago, but I pretty much only now, so I probably do more coaching than psychotherapy, but I've got quite a narrow niche. I tend to work with teenagers and young people who are self-harming and suicidal. So there's a sort of particular way of working with that demographic, really. Often they've got an issue, they're struggling with maybe their gender identity or something that's connected, but the common denominator would be that they're sort of clinging on a bit.
So they come to you at this sort of last point or last need of rescue here?
It varies. I mean, it tends to be that if you think of it, if we're all honest, most of us push our pain points away, don't we, until they become too much. But sometimes I get them a wee bit earlier. And but often it'll be at that point when life's got very difficult. And at the moment, of course, with what's been going on, it's been, really busy as far as that's concerned. It's been a really tough time for teenagers and sort of early 20s, I think. It's been tough for everybody. But that isolation with not being at uni and not being at school, I think it's been particularly problematic. It's been quite hard.
And how do people find you, Shelley? How do they get?
It's pretty much word of mouth, really, for that. I've got a separate website for my coaching and speaking and so on. So it's usually recommendation, and I do have a website which is Shelley Bridgman Psychotherapy, but as I said, I mainly now get people through some kind of referral.
It makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned it's a narrow niche of working with this particular group of young people and teenagers who are self-harming or suicidal or struggling with their gender identity. How did you decide that was going to be your area of speciality?
I didn't. It found me. I think that's what tends to happen in life, that we, because I'm sure we'll come to in a minute, it's something I've got personal experience of. So, and I was doing quite a bit of work supporting a charity and so on. And it's a small world really with that sort of thing. And it just grew from a sort of standing start. But I was supporting a charity who support young people. And I think, once you get a few clients, then you become known. And it just goes from there, really. I don't suppose you have to beg people to come on your podcast now.
Not for a long.
Not if you ever did.
No, it's funny, isn't it? Actually, I was just casting back because today, when we're recording, was exactly 17 months ago that I launched the show, and it's sort of 18 months ago since I actually had the idea. So it's and I reached out to a handful of people, and then ever since then, it's just been a knock-on sort of ripple of people saying, "Oh, you must have this person on. Oh, I recommend this person," and it's been fantastic. So again, like yourself, it did grow from a sort of standing start, and it's just evolved as things do.
Yeah. And I got into coaching really from it because there's a lot of nonsense talked about therapy, because there's lots of different psychotherapies. And, people usually make the distinction, which to a large extent is true, that when you're coaching, you're looking at outcome focus, whereas with therapy, sometimes you're dealing with an issue. But I got into coaching because it was one of those chance meetings. I knew somebody who knew somebody, and there was a young athlete a few years ago, and we were talking sort of club level, 17-year-old who was expected to go on and do great things. But there was a problem. There was something going on in her head because she was a slow starter, 100-meter runner, explosive speed, but was always kind of having to overtake everybody. And so we did some work with her. And it was quite simple, really, because as part of what I do is hypnosis. And it came out, she wasn't even conscious of it, that when she was very little, she'd been, I think it was even something silly like an egg and spoon race. And she'd been so keen, she'd sort of jumped off too quickly and dropped the egg or false started or whatever. And she remembered seeing her father walking away in disgust. And she was only about 6 or 7. And she'd forgotten it at a conscious level, but of course she was sitting in the blocks, as the expression goes. And that's how I kind of made the crossover, really. Because when somebody who's a sports psychologist said, well, look, don't get hung up on not going backwards. He had a great expression. He said, look, even Lewis Hamilton's got wing mirrors. He's focused and going forward, but you check to see what's gone on as well. And I always remembered that. So I'm not averse to, if I'm coaching an exec or something, if we find there's a block, to say, well, look, let's root this out, rather than just being sort of so dogmatic about having an outcome and not being allowed to look back in the past. So I think there are a lot of links. And in fact, the therapy I studied was Gestalt, which was founded by Fritz Perls and Paul Goodman, and Perls was an influencer of NLP. So, I think we can forget sometimes that a lot of these things are interlinked. You've got to be clear what you're doing, obviously. But for me, it's like, why not use all the tools in the toolbox if you've got them?
I love that. So you've now sort of conjured up this lovely blend of therapy, coaching, hypnosis, and NLP to, as you said, root out what may be underlying that people aren't aware of.
I'm very clear about what I'm doing. Is it coaching or is it psychotherapy? But there's nothing to stop you stopping and saying, hang on a minute, I think it's something we could deal with here.
It's switching of hats and being very clear that you're contracting with a client, that they're happy with you to try that with them.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that there was a personal experience that sort of led you into this work. Explore more about that, Shelley.
Well, I actually started off being, I remember I was 21, I have a good memory, and I was feeling very isolated. And I became a Samaritan volunteer. And I did that for several years, but, it was obviously not paid. It was volunteering. And that sparked an interest in psychotherapy, because I thought I wanted to do a bit more than just listening. So it sort of spun off from there, really. But, I came from an era, I remember when I was about 5, I knew I was different, but I couldn't articulate it at that age. You don't have a vocabulary. And there really wasn't one anyway. I mean, it was before the internet, and I didn't know anybody else could be feeling the way I was feeling. And I remember being in Liverpool, I had an aunt who lived there on holiday, and I remember reading in a newspaper, it was some awful pejorative language it used to get used in those days. And I remember this awful sort of foreboding of feeling a connection with it. I remember reading it, and my mother came in and I sort of put the paper away, just think, so I kind of instinctively knew that it was something that is not okay. You don't talk about it. And there was no language for the words that we use these days, trans this and trans that, just didn't exist. So I did what anyone else would have done at that age and just suppressed it, really, and just got on with it, because that was the only thing I knew you could do. And, and I coped. I'm not saying my life was a misery. It wasn't. I enjoyed a lot of my childhood in many respects, but it was always nagging away. It was always this thing that was sitting on my shoulder the whole time. And got to teenager at school, and I didn't get on. I hated school. First day I went, I hated it. And the last day when I left, I hated it. And I'm sorry, I take no pride in saying that. I actually left at 14. It was before my 15th birthday. And I think that's mainly why I went on to get a master's in psychotherapy, just to prove that I wasn't stupid to myself, because that's what the teachers had told me. And so, and I had a wild time in my teens and 20s, clubbing, drinking, everything you shouldn't do, pretty much. But it was anything rather than being with myself. I just filled the time. And I went abroad with a friend and came back, got a job in the travel industry because it was the only thing I was interested in. Prior to that, I'd just done odd jobs. And I met somebody and we got married. And didn't share any of my feelings because I thought I could suppress it. And we had 2 wonderful daughters. And gradually the alcohol took over. I was having a breakdown, and it all came out, and I started to do something about it. So I was lucky to have a family. My immediate family were very close. I had a lot of rejection from other aspects of family and friends. But, we're talking, this was like in the 1980s. It's a different climate to the one we have now. So, but, all of these things, and one thing I've learned that I speak about a lot is that usually our biggest painful struggle is our biggest gift, because we dig deep into it because we have to, and we grow from it or we sink. And there comes a point when we have to make that choice. So, and I think a travel industry, I mean, look, I used to get off a plane from Los Angeles on a Monday and fly off to Berlin or somewhere on a Wednesday. I was having a ball. But, I was gradually killing myself with work and alcohol. And it all came to a head and couldn't do it anymore. And I literally had a breakdown. Although it wasn't literally diagnosed as that, but I now know from, the work that I've done, that's what's happening. And on a trip to South America, it was a long story behind that, which I won't go into. I just remember thinking, look, you've got to do something. You can't carry on like this. So I came back, said to my partner, look, I need to go ahead with this now. She knew anyway it was going to happen. And I did. And that was when everything imploded again, because remember, we're talking about the late 1980s, and all my clients left because they would say things like, one large corporation, household name, so I better not be naughty and name them, said to me, look, we've enjoyed working with you, but we think it's a good time for a change, which I thought was the ultimate irony, really. and I had to put it into liquidation. And within a space of 6 weeks, I liquidated my company. My mother died. And I just I couldn't take it anymore, and I took an overdose. But that's when it all changed for the better, because my partner, bless her, said to me afterwards, if you ever do try that again, you better do it properly, because I'll finish the job. If you don't you ever try and desert your children again. And the one thing I've learned from working with people who are on the edge is that they usually don't really want to die, but they just cannot figure out how to live. And it's a really important distinction. And I wasn't quite aware of that at that time. And I remember, it gets back to the topic of your podcast, thinking, why am I still here? Why am I still on the planet? There must be a reason. And I sort of began that quest, really. So music to your ears with a title like this podcast. But that's literally what happened. And I searched and searched, and I was studying, but I was very lucky. And one of the other great lessons in life for me is when the chips are down, good people sometimes turn up when you're trying to do something. And I was unemployable in the industry that I was in. And somebody said to me, look, if you're prepared to work hard, you can do quite well in financial services. And I thought, well, that's useful. I clearly don't know how to work with money. I know what I'll do. I'll advise everybody else on how to do it themselves. But I met this lovely, I was there for a while and I wasn't doing very well, but I think they saw I was trying. And there was a guy called John, and he'd been very successful. He's a multi-millionaire from business, and he wanted some mentees. And I was chosen as one of 4. And I literally just did everything he told me to do. I was so desperate. I thought, well, if he's made money from it, he's telling me to make X number of phone calls, do this, I'll do it. And interestingly, the other 3 all fell away because they didn't want to put the hard yards in. And it was my first taste of speaking because he was so pleased. He took me up to a conference that he was speaking at. I was petrified, but he sort of interviewed me on the stage, and said what I'd done and how he'd helped me. So he was an amazing man. I mean, it was transformative. And he was so pleased. This is what got me really into therapy. He gave me a gift of a ticket for Tony Robbins' first UPW in London. I think it was 1990 or 91, somewhere around there. And I went, and that sort of sparked a lot of interest, and I was learning more and more, and I'd been, so I'm now obsessive about human behavior and how we perform and, emotional intelligence, all of those things. My head's never out of a book. I'm a terrible bore when it comes to reading. I've always got a Kindle on the go and a paperback. But I'm just fascinated about what makes us behave in the way that we behave. And there's no such thing as being an expert in that. We're all learning. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned as well. Everybody's different, but I'm just fascinated by it, really. Anyway, he was amazing. And he said to me, listen, if you want to work with businesses more, you need to do presentations. And I said, look, I've never spoken in public. I can't do that. It's petrified. I was very hung up about my masculine voice. And he said, look, go and join a Toastmasters club. And he lived in Maidenhead. And he said, there's one in Maidenhead. I'll take you there. So he went with me even. And this is a multimillionaire. He's working with some rookie, He was incredible. And anyway, I was there for a few weeks, and there was a humorous speech competition, and they put me into it. And I won it. And then I won a region and an area. I ended up going to the final of the Great Britain humorous after dinner speech competition, and I was runner-up. And the winner was from Southern Ireland. So in my eyes, I was the UK champion, but I can't claim that. But one of the judges said to me, you should, that was very funny. You should, have you ever thought of doing stand-up comedy? And I thought, well, that's a challenge. So I did. And I was on the stand-up circuit for about 8 years, always in conjunction with work. And did, one woman shows at Edinburgh, took the last one to New York, having a ball, really. But I always knew it wasn't the end game. And I think what stand-up did was probably made me a better speaker on stage. Because what you have to do is learn just how to do it. And I think we underestimate that sometimes. Not just a case of getting a few PowerPoint slides. You don't learn. I mean, somebody said to me doing stand-up, said, you don't even know who you are on stage till you've done 200 gigs. And I always remember that. And I think there's a truth in it, because it takes a long time to sort of figure out who you are on a platform. So my advice to anybody would be just do it, get it wrong and do it, speak. I know there's a big thing about not speaking for free, but you've got to get on your feet somewhere. Speak at a Rotary Club or a breakfast meeting, but stand up and speak, because that's the only. So I sort of got into speaking through the back door, really, because it was more from the angle of doing presentations and comedy. But it's been an interesting journey to do that. But I really can't emphasize enough the importance of just finding something that you're interested in doing it. When we talk about why and purpose, a part of it is the process of doing. Part of it is actually just getting the wheels going. I always say to people, what are you good at? What do you enjoy? Well, start there. And then, like me, things happened and I got nudged in a slightly different direction. You can't just do a one-day seminar and find out who you are and all of what your purpose is and all that. Well, you might be able to, but I don't believe it. You see, and I did that for a long time. I was always looking for the answer out there. I was always looking to do some convention. I did that work with Tony. Then I've been to dozens of seminars, and I don't know how much money I've spent on this, that, and the other. But then actually the answer was inside all the time. But I think sometimes, a bit like the alchemist, you've got to go on the journey to come back to actually recognize where you're at. And I do have this insane, naive belief that everyone has been put on this planet to do something, individually. And it doesn't have to be dramatic. You might want to be the best. I don't want to name a profession because it implies it's sort of seen as being low down. But whatever it is, do it to the best you can. See where that takes you. If you like singing, go and sing. Join a choir. If you can't join a band, not everyone's going to be a big rock star, but that will take you somewhere else. Something will happen and you'll meet somebody or something will be pushed in front of you and you'll make a choice. But do it. We learn from doing, not from reading. We're human beings, but we're human doings. We don't learn by reading textbooks, much as I love reading them. Nobody changes their life just by reading a book. You might get inspired, but you're not going to figure it out until you actually start moving forward. But I mean, that experience for me, meeting that guy was incredible, really, because it set me off on that different path. And if you think about it, had I never had the challenge that I had, I'd be dead now, but I would have just carried on drinking and swanning around the world, staying in 5-star hotels. But it's not why I'm here. And so I wouldn't have been true to myself. So whatever happens, you pick up on it and deal with it. And my life's been no harder than anybody else's. Our experiences are just different. Everybody thinks they've got the biggest challenge in the world. And I was away a few days ago, and I was by the seaside in the UK, and I was picked the right weather. And I got talking to a couple who had a very severely disabled child. I mean, that's a hard gig. Not what I went through. I mean, that's a challenge for the parents and for the young person. And then when you look at something like that, you think, hang on, what on earth am I groaning and moaning about? Not that I hope I don't moan and groan, but, it's really important to just pick up on it and run with it.
So, Shelley, what was it that you think John saw in you?
I think it was He just saw that I was, and well, I know what it was actually. And I was on the phone at 9:30 one night making cold calls. And I think he didn't say anything at the time because he was passing through. But I think he probably thought, well, look, if you're prepared to do that, you might listen to me. I don't think it was anything more than that. Just the fact that I was really giving it a go.
And you said that the other 3 dropped out and you kept going.
Well, one of the things that I was doing was, I mean, this is in the days when you could phone people, but going in and phone, you said you'll always find the CEO or the retired rear admiral in his office at 7:30 or 8:00 before the secretary gets in. So that's when you need to make the phone call. So, and that's what I did. And it wasn't that, I just, NLPers talk about modeling, don't you? And that's all it was. I mean, I just thought, if he's doing that, I'll do it. And he was an incredible man, by the way, because we were talking, it was at the time of the Balkans conflict in the early 90s. And he was running a big fund, he set up a charity fund. And I said to him, John, why are you so passionate about this? I know it's a good cause. And he said, I'm a Jew and I was born in Berlin in 1932. How do you think I'm going to react when I hear the phrase ethnic cleansing? So he was so driven, this real passion for supporting people, just amazing.
And do you think that might have lent his belief in you, in you feeling alienated and being sort of cast aside? He would have recognised that in his own experiences.
He may have done. Yeah, he may have done. I'm not sure, but I'm forever grateful. I just wish I'd thanked him enough, probably. Not sure that I really did at the time. I did, obviously, let him know. But I think it stood me in good stead, really, all of those various experiences. And I've kind of taken that with me, really, in what I do now.
And you mentioned that somebody said that you don't know who you are until you've 200 gigs. Who are you, Shelley? Well,
I can give you sort of a nice sentence to put on a website, but I'm passionate about empowering people, and particularly marginalised people. That gives me a buzz. If somebody, for whatever reason, is on the fringes, then I'm really up for saying, come on, something going on here. And I've met some incredible people. I've worked with people who had been ready to sort of end it all at 13 and got a first at Oxford. I'm not saying I was responsible for that, but for just giving them something to cling on to, really. And it's just such a big deal. It's fun, though. I mean, that's the thing. Coaching and working with somebody is fun. Got the interaction, which I love. And, the truth is, I was not good enough to be a professional stand-up, probably. But then I don't really mind, because at one point I thought I'd love to do this. I remember being in New York thinking, I've cracked it. I'm doing a one-woman show off Broadway. This is it. And it didn't quite happen. But then I thought, it's not meant to. It's not meant to. We've all got something that we're going to be doing. And I think that still changes. I mean, the things that I'm doing now that will be different probably in a few years' time. We don't know. We can't say, well, look, this is my, vision and mission. How many times do we all talk about that? My vision is this, and this is my mission statement. That's fine, but be alive to the fact that you may need to tweak it a bit, may need to change slightly. I'm a bit headstrong. I'll go flying into things. I always joke that if I'd been with Columbus, I'd have said, look, don't worry about the map. Just go. We'll figure it out halfway across.
Yeah, that was quite a long time ago, wasn't it? 1492 or something?
Oh, I'm impressed by that. It's not, it's not one of my strengths, taking a back seat and planning. And it's, in fact, I shouldn't joke about it because it is necessary. So but it's not it's not where my skill is, really.
So casting your mind back to that 5-year-old who didn't have the vocabulary to articulate how you felt,
Yeah.
and then fast forwarding to where you are now, what have been the proudest moments for you through that journey, Shelley?
My children, I'm very proud of them. Got 2 amazing daughters and 2 grandchildren now. That was great. And I think one of the biggest things I've done is I took the UK government to law, and I won a case in the European Court of Justice. And it took 11 years from start to finish. So I think that's something, because I know it changed the law in several European countries as well. So yeah, that gave me a buzz. I'm not going to sit back here and say I didn't feel good about that.
What did you change?
Well, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, this, but essentially, I wasn't allowed to be female legally because I was married. So it meant annulling my marriage, and I refused. And I mean, now we've got same-sex marriages, it wouldn't matter, but at the time it wouldn't, and it dug in, and it would affect benefits and all sorts of things. So, and that was another illustration of good people showing up, because I lost in a tribunal, and they said there's no point in going any further because this is cut and dried. So I did, of course, and I went to an upper tribunal. And then I was told, look, the only place to go now is the High Court, but you can't do that because we won't grant leave because it's a hopeless case. And I got a pro bono barrister. Remember I said good people show up? A lady called Karen, she said she took it on, and we lost, but we went to the Court of Appeal, and then we got a solicitor came on board, and another barrister, who's top QC, all working pro bono. And we lost in the Court of Appeal, and we went to the Supreme Court. And you don't lose or win there, because they've got 5 judges, so they can make a decision, but they referred it to Europe. So in front of 17 judges in the ECJ, I was on one side of the court with my 4 members of the legal team, and there were about 250 people the other side, with just a corridor down the middle. And that's where working with 300 baying drunks on a Friday night in a club came in useful, because every time my name was mentioned, I'd feel all the eyes looking at me, and I just turned 45 degrees and smiled at them. And they had a big team of people. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. I can either say this is going to be a tough call, or I can say they must be running scared here if they need that much firepower. And my barrister was absolutely one of the best orators I've ever heard. Any speakers who think they're a good speaker, they need to go and listen to this guy. And his argument was flawless. And flew back home, and a year later we got the judgment. Nothing happens very quickly. A bit like Bleak House, if you've ever read Bleak House by Dickens, where pieces of paper get passed around chancery. I mean, so you may 11 years for 5 stages, really. So each one was like 2 years. But I just thought, I'm not going to be, even if I lose, but boxers have got a great expression. They say, you always leave everything in the ring. And I thought, I'm not going to back down. I'm going to take this absolutely as far as I can. And if we do lose, then I'll know that I couldn't have done anything else. But it was humbling. I had these amazing lawyers, and all their expenses in Luxembourg and everything. Wouldn't even let me buy them lunch at the end of the hearing. Just phenomenal.
And what did that create for other people? What did you change the law for them? What were they then able to do?
Well, it meant that people could, I'm not sure which countries exactly it applied in, but they could get legal status without having to prove anything, else, or have certain conditions met. I.e., in my case, I've got 2 kids. I wasn't going to annul a marriage just to please the British government. Ridiculous. And I know it changed the law in at least 2 European countries. So that was pleasing. I never used to talk about it much. I got anonymity because there was a lot of publicity. It was on the news and everything, but my name wasn't there, so nobody knew who it was. But I don't much care anymore. And my daughters, who are grown up, said, "Oh, for God's sake, don't give them monkeys, you know." They're more laid back than I am. But yeah, it's not newsworthy anymore anyway, because it was about 4 years ago now.
Well, you mentioned that we're all put on the planet for something individually. Do you think that's what you were put on the planet for?
No, not bigger than that. Come on, Amy, we can aim higher than that.
So what's next on the agenda then,
No,
Shelley?
I don't know, but I just think pushing what I do as much as I can. And I've decided I've read so much garbage about it. I'm actually planning you heard it here first, folks. I'm planning a sort of 3-day workshop next summer, probably in May or June, and taking a group of people away, really digging deep to help them find out some of these answers, you know. And I've already said you can't just read it in a book, but you can make a good start. You can understand yourself a bit more. And if we don't, if you think about it, we all present a face to the world that we think is, the world wants to see and we can cope with. Taking the mask off is quite scary. But it's only when we do that we can actually make real connection. And you're going to hack off some people. I've been attacked in right-wing newspapers and God knows what over the years. But then that's a badge of honor as far as I'm concerned. If they're all happy with you, you can't be doing much. So, but I'm not out in any great crusade, but whatever gifts I've got, I want to exploit. And I like speaking and training, and I love coaching and doing therapy. And I'll just get better at that as best I can. Just work at it, practice, learn new things, and see where that goes. That's the most important thing. I don't want to. I must tell you, I don't know if you ever used to watch a thing called The Actors Studio on TV. A guy called James Lipton, he used to interview people, and he always used to have this questionnaire at the end. He used to get ribbed for it a lot by a French presenter called Bernard Pivot, and he used to do this questionnaire. And he always ended up with the last question was, if God exists, what would you want him to say when you meet him? Anyway, so somebody had obviously been watching this program in this country and asked me that question. And I said, well, the first thing I'd like him to say is, why are you so late? But the second thing is, and not so much what I'd like somebody to say, but what I don't want anyone to say is, why were you never really you? That is the biggest crime that any of us can commit. If you think about it, why were you never you? Shelley, Amy, whatever the name is, that would be unforgivable.
What does it take to be you?
I think just gradually peeling off the layers, finding the courage, and if you haven't got it, get help from people. People will always help you if you put a hand out. Yeah, you know that from the work that you do. In my experiences, people will always, and I've found, very senior, the more senior people are, the more willing they are to help. And I've had, speakers, coaches, therapists, I'll ring someone up or email them. And they always say yes. Very rarely will they say no. I would never abuse it. So I'm really fascinated by what you're doing. Can you put me in a direction of anything that I could read about that, whatever it might be? And people will, but we tend not to, because we think, I can't do that. I can't bother them. Well, they're too big. They're too important. I don't want to do that. And we won't talk about it now, but one of the biggest barriers is shame, because we sit there feeling a sense of shame about who we are. I had that for a long time, but it was only me who caused it. Nobody can make you feel shame. You can feel shame, but you don't have to. Sometimes it takes a bit of help with that, but nobody can make you feel it. And nobody can actually make you do very much in life when it comes down to it. We make certain choices feeling that that's what everybody wants. But our real persona, our real depth is about, being me, being you, whatever that means. And not everyone's going to like it. I find it quite shocking to think sometimes that not everybody loves me, but but they don't.
Well, I love you, Shelley. You're fantastic.
Thank you. But people don't, though, do they? And if you're doing anything useful, you're going to get people who won't like you. Now, you can be bland and down the middle of the road, but you won't get anywhere. But that's where we need to help people, I think, and give them a bit of hope sometimes, a few tools, let them know that there's something that is there. And people have to do it in the end. I mean, all we can do is try and give people tools. I've never saved anybody's life. I've never changed anybody. I like to think I've helped with some tools to give to them. But that's the most that I've ever done. It's preposterous to think that we've actually, changed a life, saved a life. No, I haven't. I may have said to somebody, look, if you do this, let's understand this, maybe if you try that, maybe if you try this. And not given up on them, but they have to do it.
So anybody who's thinking that they need some help and they may be needing that moment of hope that you can share and the tools that you can share, how would they get in contact with you, Shelley?
Well, my website is easy enough. It's shelleybridgman.com, and my LinkedIn. I spend most of my social media time on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn name is Shelley Bridgman. So they're the easiest two places, really.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure they go in the show notes because some people may misspell Shelley and Bridgman. So with the E's in the different places.
There's 2 E's in Shelley and none in Bridgman. I always say I had illiterate ancestors who couldn't spell.
Well, you certainly made up with that with your masters, so all good. Shelley, it's been incredible hearing your story today, and I know that people will want to get in contact with you, especially with the retreat that you mentioned that you're going to be doing next summer. That sounds incredible in that, and just for the context, that's summer 2022, and that will be the 3 days. What will they be expecting to achieve on that, and how will you help them towards moving into being more them?
Give them, and the intention is to give them the tools to help understand why they're thinking the way they're thinking, who they are, and what they believe their strengths are, and really iron that out and dig deep, chuck away the garbage, and help them to take the mask off.
And do you have some final words, Shelley?
I think all I would say is, we've just come out of a pandemic. Life's pretty tough. Just been watching party political conferences. Don't rely on that lot. I don't care. I'm not going to get political about a particular colour rosette. No one's going to change your life for you. And you've got to do it yourself, but never stop believing that you're not special and that there's something that you're here to do that only you can do. That you have to cling on to that. That's the one truth that I know absolutely. And it's not always easy, but that's what you have to do. My favourite quote of all time, I hadn't prepared to say this, so I'm going to paraphrase it. I haven't looked it up. It was Camus, the great existentialist. And he said, in the depth of winter, I discovered that I had within me an irrepressible spring. And that, I get choked up just saying that now. I think it's one of the most profound quotes that I've read. And that inspires me.
Thank you for listening to Focus on Why with me, Amy Rowlandson. To show your appreciation and to help other listeners understand what value you have received from tuning in today, please leave me an Apple Podcast 5-star review. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. To keep it going, connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook or Twitter, or join the inspiring, uplifting and positive Focus on Why Facebook group. All the links are in the show notes. have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.